So that's a little bit of it. You can check it out on Marketplace. I highly recommend watching it. It was pretty interesting to sort of see what they're doing in the UK to prevent auto theft. I will be doing an interview with the manufacturers rep for Canada sometime soon. He was going into the Washington, D.C. on the last time we were trying to do that show. But good morning and welcome.
Recording stopped.
My name's Tony Lund. I'm the general manager of Fred Bean's Kia and Landmark. We're trying to take a minute to talk about Larry Feldman, Career Change USA. Larry and I have been working together for about the last 12 years now. And anything I've ever needed as far as recruiting, training, Larry's been right there. Larry's got me salespeople, he's got me managers, he's got me technicians even through the toughest times in the industry. And he is just the kind of guy who's going to tell you exactly what's on his mind. He's going to tell you exactly what he thinks. But Larry also has the expertise to back it up. When he was in the dealership world, he was a top performer. And that's really important to my staff, especially as it pertains to training. A lot of people can come in and teach out the textbook, but Larry has a real-world experience dealing with customers, dealing with situations in dealerships that we go through on a daily basis and try to train on. But Larry's been through it, so he can really empathize with the people and tell you what's worked for him and maybe what way not to go. Larry is just always at a 10. I mean, his energy level is always up there. And I think people, they just love that and they feed off of it. He's not faking it. He is genuinely excited to come in and help you. He's excited to come in and help grow your business. And he's one of those people who just really enjoys seeing dealers succeed and have a lot of fun at the same time.
Life is about connection. Having a support system to lean on. And roads to endless possibility. At every turn, guiding the way, we are building the connections that move you.
So what would your dealership feel like if your entire sales staff was literally on fire, your sales and service staff? They were nonstop all over social media, completely dominating your marketplace. They could do it in 30 days or less and then continue their education to do it for an entire 6 months or a year. You literally would completely take over the entire marketplace and no one would be able to compete with you. And that's what we can do for you. So when you're walking around your community, whether you're at local restaurants or you're going to the gym, you don't want to be bothered? Fine, you won't be bothered. But a lot of people will walk up to you and say, oh my God, I love your social media. Your staff is amazing. We love what you're doing in the community. We want to come buy a car from you. We want to get an oil change at your dealership. Your community is absolutely going to love you. And it doesn't matter what platform you're on. You could be on TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all social media platforms. You will literally be all over the place. And not only will you have ads running, but your own staff is going to be promoting your brand and promoting themselves within the dealership and within the business. So it's like running an ad times 100-fold because your entire staff is participating in the process. I've traveled all over North America. I've trained Toyota. I've trained Nissan. I've been to driving sales. I've been to Women in Auto. I get hired as a speaker for conferences at universities all over the country. And I can help change the trajectory of your dealership right now.
Good morning and welcome. So I thought today we would talk a little bit about a bunch of different stuff going on, but I know Peter was at Digital Dealer. I'm assuming, Larry, were you at Digital Dealer this year? Oh, 1 second. I got to unmute you. There's some background mute. How do I do that? 1 second here. 1 second, Larry. Where are you? Here we go. Unmute. There you go. So unmute yourself.
Yeah, I said I didn't make it, but Peter was there, so he gathered enough information for 5 guys like me. So he will illuminate and elucidate.
Yeah, so Peter, maybe you could tell us more about what you do, but also share a little details on Digital Dealer. I know we were talking a little bit about it before the show. I know you had a chance to go this year. So what was your thought on the show? And tell us more about what you're doing these days. It's been a while.
Yeah, so thanks for having me in.
No worries. Yeah.
Clearly?
You're all good.
Okay. So in saying that, I attended Digital Dealer for the first time this year.
What's your other language, Osama?
I went with...
I'm sorry. Excellent.
1 second.
Larry, we need you to mute.
It's already enough. Go ahead.
Okay. So going for the first time this year, it was really interesting on what this show was all about. If it was for me, I can't say it was, but I had extreme success because 4 of my clients were there. It was Hoodoo was there, Decoso was there, Benchmark Data Suite was there, and Onboardian was there. And they're 4 tech companies that are really amazing, and we basically knocked it out of the park. But we didn't have a booth, and it was just from walking around, talking to people, seeing how we could integrate with their products. And then the secondary response was when dealers were around, they heard about our solutions and just flocked to them. But as a show, there were some things that I didn't like, and there were some things that I really liked. Was that it was small and intimate, so you got to see everybody that was there. It was in the MGM, which was a great spot for it. But the way they actually ran the show was unique because, like, for example, the social events were away from the expo hall.
Right.
So you couldn't walk around with a drink in after hours and talk to the vendors like you can in NADA.
Right.
So there wasn't that interaction, and people were kind of lost in the socials. The other thing that I found was they were very militant about getting into the expo hall. Like, you couldn't enter the expo hall 1 minute before the time that the expo hall was there. They basically had 5 security cards blocking the door, and you couldn't get in. That I found comical. It was like, are you telling me that the expo people, that the vendors didn't want you in mingling before they actually opened? And so that I found really funny. But other than that, it was a very big success for us. One of my clients picked up almost 90 rooftops.
Oh,
so
well done.
It was significant. And would I go back again? Yes, absolutely. Do I think they have to change their format in a couple of ways, especially the expense? Like, it was $2,300 a ticket, and when you compare that to what I can get into NADA for under $1,000 and be exposed to 700 plus vendors,
yeah,
I didn't see the value there. And they really have to to change that up. The other thing that I did hear is that they were taxing the speakers for actually speaking.
Wow.
And they have a big fight on their hand with that. So again, a little bit of mismanagement. They're fighting a dying show, and that's a big issue when you come back after the speakers have agreed to speak, and then you try to tax them on it. So challenges there.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to go a couple of years ago. I went to driving sales and digital dealer. We did some interviews of both, I believe. And digital dealer, and I think they used to have two. They had one in Florida and one in Vegas. I think it used to be that way. Driving sales, I'm not sure what's going on with that one. But part of the challenge
it's called Dealer Point now.
Yeah, part of the challenge they had with driving digital dealer was that nobody wanted to go to the one in Florida. They all wanted to go to the Vegas one, but I'm not sure. I was just curious. Doug, did you have some thoughts on digital dealer? Did you attend it?
I didn't. We sent a group out there, and they were, I guess, to mirror what Peter said, they were underwhelmed. I think that some of these shows start losing their relevance after a while, and if they don't change with the times, I think that it's just more of the same. I sometimes think that some of these shows are best to attend every 2 to 3 years to see if there's something new, but going annually and certainly trying to have a booth doesn't, the cost doesn't really justify it. So yeah, I think some of them have perhaps lost their usefulness or need to do a pivot into something that's a little bit more relevant.
Oh, I agree 100%.
Everything that I look at, Doug, is if you were to take all the events that are offered in automotive, and we're not talking about the regional events with the Texas Dealer Association and things like that, or the manufacturers events like Mopar in Vegas and things like that. Just the events that are offered by vendors and media companies like these digital dealers, for sending one person a year, it's over $100,000, and that's not even including like having a booth. That it's getting to be ridiculous, and you have to really define which is actually beneficial to you. And the one that has stood out for me, from what I've heard, is the one for the Minority Automobile Dealers Association.
Yeah, NIADA.
It's held in Miami. NAMAD.
Yeah, NIADA is also really good. And I'd highly recommend Used Car Week. We've done a number of them. If you are attending the Scottsdale one, I think it's coming up in November. Highly recommend that one. Because they run a really classy show, like all the food's included. It's a well done show. But NIADA, I know the one we attended last year had some challenges because they laid off their marketing team before the show. But it was also a good show, I thought. And I know there are some shows just OEM driven, like the Mopar one and a few others. And of course, SEMA show, I don't know when I'm going back, but that's a show that is to be experienced. You should go just for the experience.
We're going to Used Car Week this year, but as I look at the list of attendees, I would say looks like 85-90% of them are vendors.
That's probably just the list they released. They'll get about 2,000 dealers there. That's what it was the last time I went. But it's a really well run show. So you'll get a lot of value.
We went there a couple of years ago. We're going again this year. And we're really looking forward to NADA in January.
Yeah, and a shout out to Truly. When we were at the show last year, they had like a swag store at the show, which was kind of crazy. But yeah, definitely good. And I know Larry's at a store, so he may or may not be able to comment. Oh, is he back? He's got on mute, Larry.
What was the question?
Well, you're at a store, so I guess the question, how many shows do you go to a year, and what shows do you see value? Now that we're talking about different shows.
At this point, I go to NADA and I go to a soda company, just because I run into people like Doug Reeves. Peter wasn't going to a lot of shows. Now he's going to a lot of them because so many people have reached out to him for help and support. I believe I heard Doug say in between interviews that a lot of these shows tend to be repetitive and seem to have lost focus. Doug, you and I are exactly on the same page. But I still think a couple times a year you need to, put your shake hands and put your face out there. So we'll be at NADA in New Orleans, and I usually do a SodaCon, which is now super convenient because they seem to have settled in Baltimore, which is about an hour and a half from my house. Hopefully that answers the question. We're interviewing some really strong people today, but I'll jump in as much as I can. It's always good to see you and Doug and Peter, of course.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we used to go initially with the show. We went to 4 or 5 shows on an annual basis. I'm trying to keep it down probably to about 2 shows every year, maybe 3 on the outside for 2025.
Tell me about SEMA. Dane invited
Yeah,
me to SEMA.
that's a show.
If you've never been there,
Oh,
it's like an Alice in Wonderland of the car things. You don't see a tire display, you see 7,000 tire displays. We're like, I didn't realize there was this much demand for stuff that I never heard of.
oh yeah, that show, if you only do it once, I highly recommend it. It is a little bit of a gauntlet to get approved to actually buy a ticket to go, and media is even harder for some reason. But if you do one show in your life at that scale, that's the one to do. They get between 250,000 and 500,000 people during the vendor piece. And there's 2 shows. There's SEMA and Apex. They're in different locations. It's 1.6 million square feet of indoor space just for exhibitors alone. Plus you have outdoor arenas they were doing drifting and burnouts, I think, when I was there. More custom trucks than I've ever seen in one place. Trucks after truck. There's about 150,000 square feet of electric car stuff. Manufacturers are there as well. So everything from your car enthusiasts to car dealers to people selling stuff, anything from you name it, they sell it. It is overwhelming, so I'd highly recommend, if you're going, limit your exposure. It's just a lot. It was a lot. Larry, myself, and my wife went to that show, and it was just a lot. There was just a lot. I mean, they broke the monorail because they couldn't handle the amount of people, which was kind of funny. But yeah, it was a great show to experience. Even if all you're doing is walking around. In terms of booth, I have no idea what that looks like, but definitely a lot of people. I mean, you'll see a lot of people. Like it's like a combination of like what I say, like a concert venue and like anything to do with a car at scale. And then custom cars for days. Like you name the custom car person, they're there. Everything from obviously Chip Foose to people that you would know. And then manufacturers are there at scale. I think what was there that year? I think Toyota was there at scale. Ford might have been there a little bit. There was a couple others, but the scale of it is insane. I mean, it's just the amount of stuff in one place. I think it's the largest car show in North America. I mean, it's nuts, totally nuts. Don't do another show after it. That's what we thought would be a good idea. I don't recommend that. We did, I think, Used Car Week back to back, which was a lot. But yeah, it was a good show, definitely. And then in terms of other shows, we've obviously been to most. NIADA, I'd also recommend. I haven't been to NABID, but maybe that's something I do next year. What happens at NABID? Do you have any thoughts on that, Doug?
Well,
or Peter, go ahead.
Well, what I had learned from the people that went to that show was that the actual interaction between dealers and vendors was like 10 times that of any other show.
Wow.
For some reason, it was like the barrier wall was removed, and that everyone could turn around and have a exposure to dealers. And not only that, but the dealers were receptive to vendors in their communications, because I don't know why it is, but it was every single vendor I talked to that was at that show said they walked away from that show with more reception than they've ever had at any other event.
Is that annual? Is it an annual show?
Pardon?
Is it annual? Like every day?
An annual show, yes. It's held in Miami.
Oh, Miami. Okay.
And I believe it's at the Fountain Blue. So nice venue, and it's significant. So in understanding that, I will. It's on my calendar to go next year for sure. And the other part of it is, so next year I plan that I will be. There's a couple shows that I have to be at. I have to be at Women in Automotive, which is a challenge because that's right out of SodaCon at the same time. So you either you go one day at a SodaCon and 2 days at Women in Automotive, or the reverse, because they overlap each other. So those are two shows that I'd like to be at. NAMED is another one. The I will be at Digital Dealer next year because Digital Dealer will be sponsoring me to go as a influencer in automotive.
Right.
And obviously I'll be at. I've already booked for NADA, but the crazy thing about NADA that I heard this year was that they have a waiting list of 170 companies for booth space.
Well, yeah, there's a big waiting list, but I think that has to do with probably the scale of the venue. Because I haven't been to New Orleans in almost 30 years before the tsunami, I think, when I was there last. But obviously, if you're going to NADA, you want to be booking your hotel somewhat soon, if not right away. In terms of booth space, I'm not sure, but I noticed it was sold out when I was looking at it over the weekend. But I think that probably has to do with the scale of the venue in terms of actual space.
The other thing I heard about it, which was very interesting, is because I looked at buying a booth myself. I was going to get a 10 by 10 there, just to list all the strategic partners that I've gained over the last year. And in saying that, they want to be on the waiting list. They want the booth paid in full. So is if you get moved up the list.
Well, as a new exhibitor, and I can comment on this because about 5 years ago was, I think, the first NADA, maybe 6 years ago now, that I went to. I was working for a company that was a new exhibitor. They generally have new exhibitors in a different area, and then once you're there more than 1 year, you get a little bit more preference in terms of where you are. And from a point of view of generally what people do is they'll wait till later on because they don't sell at the booths, they get them for less. But it looks like this year that's not the way. Doug, are you guys going with A to Z? Or you guys can have a booth? NADA?
Well, where? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll be there. Yeah, we'll have a substantial booth.
Oh, I can know. So, I mean, obviously, I may be at the Velo booth. I'm not sure at this point, but that's something that we're talking to them about. Larry, I'm assuming you're going to NADA in New Orleans. Get yourself some exciting food for once. So as you look into 2025, I mean, NADA seems to be very early these days. Do you think that's a good thing? I mean, I remember years ago it seemed to be a little later in the year. Do you think it's good to have it at the beginning of the year? I mean, what's your thought?
Yeah, I think so, because the timing is dealers will probably just to close out their year-end books. They'll certainly still have goals for 2025 on the in their minds. So they might be open to looking at how do I want to change my dealership this year. I think the timing is probably good. I think the later in the year, the more they're kind of set, they've already blown their budgets or whatever, and they might be more set in their ways. So, I think earlier is better.
So I got a question for you, Doug. Here's one. Do you have? We all know that when we approach a dealer or a vendor, and we talk to them, if we approach them in the beginning of the year, they say, "Oh, the budget's already being set and spent," and at the end of the year, they say, "Well, we're contemplating on where we're going to move our budgets for 2025, for example." Right. And where is the actual sweet spot? Do you look at it and say, "Okay, we want to promote our products in, say, August, September for 2025, or do you look at promoting your products in January, February for 2025?
Peter, do you mind if I jump in before?
Go right ahead.
I think the right answer is it depends on the nature of what it is you're selling and they're buying. Everywhere I go, they say, yeah, we need 2 or 3 guys or we need 6 guys. But if you got somebody exceptional, we'll take them. If your product makes sense for them, they'll find a way to open their budget. And if they're not
Exactly.
you, they'll always tell you the same nonsense. Yeah, we already spent our thing. And I think Doug will agree with me. It's more dependent on what value you're bringing. Because if you're bringing value, it's amazing how that calendar opens wide up. You know, and if it's not, it's not. Peter, Doug, Ian, it's so funny. I was on a show, and they were talking about people, the automotive partners, and they were talking about getting ghosted. Well, it's really simple. When guys are not that interested, or haven't made up their mind, or they're afraid to tell their boss, they ghost you. But when a guy really has a need, they hunt you down like you're the fugitive. You know?
Right.
So I
100%.
think it's more a matter of what is it that you're presenting, what kind of need are you fulfilling, and then I think the budget means nothing. I never, I own this story. I've never had anybody say to me, "Well, this will make us $1 million, but we already spent all our money." Well, let's cancel something. Let's find something. Do you agree, Doug?
Yeah, no, I think you're right there. I think generally the beginning of the year, dealers forecast the direction they want to take. And it's a matter of okay, who are we going to look at to address this direction? But I also think that in this industry, things change so quickly that you almost have to be able to pivot on a dime. So, for example, when the CDK thing happened, that changes your messaging quickly. When the cars rule they're finally adjudicated, that could change your messaging quickly. So I don't know that there's a particular time of the year when it's best to, forecast when you're going to launch, as opposed to being consistent in your messaging. As you make enhancements to your product, or as you make changes, obviously you want to blast out that, or as partnerships change, you do that. But more, it's being agile enough to say, I have a solution to this, I have a solution to that.
Well,
As
100%.
market conditions change.
100%. When you look at 2020, to give you an example, everyone was panicked, so they didn't buy much. And then in 2022 or 2023, when things got really good for dealers, they're like, we don't need anything because we got it all figured out. And now it's about, okay, well, things are changing again. So what do we need? But to Larry's point and to Doug's, really it's about consistency in terms of messaging and new features, but also really touching those people over time. I think the mistake a lot of people selling to the business make is they think that it's going to be a quick sale every single time. And that's not always the case. Timing is everything, in my opinion, in any sales and anything. But go ahead, Peter.
So going back to CDK actually, the debacle with CDK actually launched everything with my company, because breaking into the United States from Canada was very, very difficult. But as soon as CDK fell apart and I started showing a couple of things and the connections that were out there, my visibility went through the roof. And with that, one of the challenges is, as is being said, is if there is an opportunity, and one of those things I noticed, if you present a 2 times ROI, you're not getting looked at. A 5x will get you a phone call. A 10x will get you a demo, and a 20x will get you into a store. If you can show that, then that's the scalability. And as Larry said, people will make room for you. Now, the other side of things is to relay that sense of urgency. For example, right now between Digital Dealer and NADA is a time period that, like I saw Clint Burns advertising his hospitality night at NADA last week. So it's already ramping up for NADA to capture the attention and everything else. Now, there's so many vendors out there that are falling behind by saying, "Oh, well, we're making our decisions about what we're going to do for NADA." Well, if you're not there and making those decisions now, you are not going to carry the momentum forward after the show. And I said to a vendor, NADA is like the Daytona 500. it is the biggest event. It starts the year off, and it's that momentum that you carry from it that is going to make or break your year. And if you don't recognize that and you don't build up that momentum, you're going to waste the money that you're going to spend at an ADA, and because you're riding by the seat of your pants, and it's just not going to work for you. So capturing that attention is so important moving into an ADA, and I'm just glad that I'm representing the vendors that I'm representing, and they're already capturing meetings moving forward.
Well, I always use the example of Digital Airstrike, and we've been at many of their events over the years. And I was talking to Mr. Barry, I think last year at the show, about sort of what their plan was as they put together their event, and they always have a very large event. They plan it out 6 months before, so they're that far ahead of it. And the one that always strikes my attention, looking back to any days I've been at, is really the ability to put that plan together and execute, and really to set up those meetings early. Doug, I know you have to hop off, but what's your advice to someone planning an ADA?
One, yeah, definitely get on it early. Two, have a plan. Three, do as much outreach as you can and try to set up as many meetings in advance as possible. And then just hold on to your hat and be ready for it, because I think I'll be really excited for this year. I'm excited to get there. I think we've got some interesting things we'll be sharing. So, but yeah, plan ahead, reach out, promote the hell out of it, and be ready for it. And I got to hop off, guys. Good show. See you later.
All right. Thanks, Doug. Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, when I look at Digital Airstrike and I look at the size of not even their booth at the show, but the event they do every year. And I think last year there was an event at a Prohibition Bar for a fixed ops company that I know very well. I mean, really, it's about how can I get people together and set up meetings ahead of time. I mean, the whole idea of putting a booth in and hoping to catch some business, that's a crazy idea, in my opinion. I mean, you really got to look at it and say, okay, I'm investing X, how do I get return? But more importantly, how do I make sure the people that I have at the show, at a booth, get that return? And I think really that's about really putting a game plan together, even if that's setting up meetings for lunch or dinner or breakfast, or if it's having an event off site. I know A to Z Sync did that last year with Amazon. But it's not all about a booth. It's about having a game plan and executing on it. And having been to a number of shows now, both working for companies and just doing interviews, I would say that that's a great plan. But you also have to have a goal. So if I'm setting up 50 meetings or 20 meetings, it's not all about meetings. It's about, are you meeting with the right people? And I think that's an area where NADA stands above and beyond, is anyone who's anyone in the market who's a trailblazer is going to be out there with at least somebody at the show. And that's just not Canada and the US, that's international companies from South America and from other countries as well.
Yeah. So going to, for example, like you said, there are so many international companies that are now trying to enter the U.S. market. Decoso, which is one of my clients, has entered the U.S. market, and they're trying to capture the market based on what is necessary for dealers. And secondly, when, as Doug says, the CARS Act gets adjudicated, they will absolutely need this product, because that'll save them from compliance issues that the FTC just wants to. They want to find dealers. They're out there finding dealers. The fines are anywhere from small fines to just one dealer in Arizona was fined 2.6 million. Napleton was fined. Ashbury was fined. It's they're going after dealers. In Ashbury, I think was $5 or $10 million they were fined. It's a huge number. So they're entering into the U.S. market. I was talking to Venus Toros, who you met a couple of years ago, and her company is getting into the U.S. market, and it's a massive need for the opportunity. But again, I represent companies from Australia to Germany to UK, Czech, Canada, as well as US companies now, and that awareness is what they hire me for, or they want that visibility. But it's again, don't waste your money thinking that you can just go and show up. You can't.
Yeah, I mean, my
right.
Yeah, my advice for a company, to your point, who's thinking about doing NADA and not sure, is to go to the event first, just to observe what's actually going on before you make a huge capital investment. You may just want to go check out the show and see what's actually going on, which is my opinion for SEMA. I was at an event here in Calgary on Friday with a lighting company that helps companies modify lights or fix lighting arrays. And I said, you need to be at the SEMA show. Why? Because there's a huge amount of companies there, but there's also all kinds of companies globally that have lighting in their location, automotive or automotive related. And I would say that if you're looking at putting a booth in for SEMA or a booth in for NADA, and I'll always use the example of Techion, you probably want to get a sense the year before of who else is there and what they bring. And I think Techion pretty clearly did that before they made their first appearance, because they looked at what the landscape was. But also, when you look at it, you got to say, okay, if I'm investing, $10,000 to $50,000, or $100,000 to $250,000, or whatever that number looks like, I've got to make sure that I get a return on that investment. And a lot of that is learning, but also having a game plan and executing. And I think a lot of small booths don't have that. They just show up and they hope it works out, and that's crazy. In my opinion,
it's exactly to the effect of the spray and pray mentality of the automobile industry, and they're not looking at targeted. They're not looking at targeted returns. They're looking at, hey, can I capture 5% of this? And if I can capture 5% of it, it makes our investment worthwhile. Whereas if I was to look at it as a professional in this industry and referring my clients, is I look at it and saying I'd rather look at a targeted response and invest double, because I can return probably 25% on their investment.
Yeah,
and it's so important to have that plan, and your plan has to be now. It's not down the road, because even though that we decided to go to digital dealer at the last minute, we had about a 6-week ramp up, and in that 6-week ramp up, we absolutely hit everywhere that we could, informing everyone that we would be there as walking the show and to find us. And in doing so, and if you know the MGM, the actual hotel and the conference center are about a 20-minute walk in the hotel.
Yeah.
Well, the average walk for us to get to the conference center was over an hour, because we couldn't stop, because we created that visibility. And that was far beyond what we had as an investment as a booth, because we didn't have a booth. People just said, hey, you know what? And I ran into people that I'd never met before because of what we put out there on channels like LinkedIn and in our live streams. So it was well worth the effort.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at, if I'm looking at doing an investment in NADA and I haven't done that before, you may want to start by looking at some of these other shows and saying, hey, instead of investing in the biggest show in the industry, I may want to start by learning some stuff from the smaller shows, whether that be Digital Dealer or Driving Sales or NADA or Nomad or any of these shows. So that way you can at least have an understanding of what's possible. And then from there, then move up to that show or budget that out. I think the mistake a lot of smaller companies do, especially from the Canadian international markets, is they show up and have no idea. I mean, I always use the example of the show that we interviewed a Chinese company called Taibo Cars at Used Car Week. And they had never been doing anything in North America. They knew nothing about the market. They showed up with people, most of which didn't speak English, which was kind of interesting. But more importantly, they just didn't do their homework. Like they didn't take the time to go and show up. And that to me was a big misstep. Having said that, I mean, it's not like they have a lack of money, but if you're looking at expanding a car brand or doing a go-to-market strategy with something that goes into market, they had retail and digital. I mean, go to the shows that would give you that insight before, and then plan that out, or hire someone who has that experience, right?
Right. So in looking at that, and that's again why people look at hiring someone like me to go to those shows for them, because in not saying this in an egotistical way, I can walk through the show and I know who you have to talk to, and I know the people there that are important to create that connection. When we launched Decoso in North America, we actually have 39 influencers in the automotive space representing us already, and so we don't have to have a sales force or anything like that. They're already in place and they're already promoting our product right across North America. So it's that typical strategy play when you have a company like you said, Tyvo, coming into North America, and they're just coming in and saying, "Hey, we're going to attend this event." Well, is that event worth it? Second of all, the funny thing is, NADA is the least expensive event of them all.
Yeah.
and and that's from a vendor's perspective or going there as an individual. It's the least expensive because it's the largest, so they can tie out their costs on a grander scale. So yes, get into it, get into that visibility. Like Doug and his company didn't attend NADA last year. Bordian didn't attend NADA, but they were all there and they were having off-site meetings.
Yeah.
So that they were capturing the attendance, but they weren't interfering, and therefore they didn't have a challenge with NADA. Where I've seen people do the exact same thing at Digital Dealer and now not welcome back. So again, you have to be strategic in how you're doing it, and you do not advertise against them to pull the people away, because otherwise you will be blacklisted. And there's a number of companies out there that have been, and it's sad to say because we're all competing for the same visibility, but it's these shows that make it difficult for us to create that visibility.
Yeah, I mean, I think the learning from that, at least from my point of view, is most dealers will be in town. There's nothing to stop you from saying, "Hey, let's have a lunch meeting, let's have a business meeting." As long as you're doing that directly, you're fine. That's also true when I looked at NIADA or even Used Car Week. A sizable amount of people will be in town for that. NIADA is the Independent Automotive Dealer Association. I think it's an area where a lot of people selling to the industry ignore because it's not a franchise dealer, and the numbers in those cases are much bigger than you realize. But more important, it's the same process. So if I'm looking at 3 or 4 shows in a year, or 4 to 6 shows, whatever that number is for you, you really need to think about it strategically and go, okay, well, who's going to be at these shows? Are they in my target market? I think that the mistake a lot of companies make when they're targeting automotive dealers is they try and target a whole market. So they target US of A, or they target Canada and the USA, or they target North America with Mexico. And they're not really thinking strategically about in market, which markets to target, which markets maybe their competitors aren't targeting, but more importantly, how to target those markets. To your point about ROI, that's important, but also it's about, how do you showcase that technology? And I think in a lot of cases, having probably seen more demos than most people on the planet, since I'm approached almost every day to look at stuff. I would say the biggest mistake a lot of technology companies make in auto is their demos are just too long. They're not focusing on the touch points, a couple touch points that dealers may be interested in. They want to show you everything in a bag of chips, and it's too much for most dealers. It's not that dealers aren't bright; they don't have that much focus. They can't look at that and really get into it.
Because the commodity is time.
Yeah.
And you're competing against that time and attention. So trying to jump into it, and I've said this a number of times. The average GM has 8 categories that they look after at a dealership. If you take that in transition times and all that, they have between 30 and 45 minutes per category per day to oversee their operations. How much time do they have to actually engage in new opportunities and technology and everything? Very little. They probably associate less than an hour a week. So you're competing in that hour, and you have to have some solution that is going to change the world for them to even compete in that hour. So again, where do you want to get your maximum return? In my opinion, if moving forward, there's only three or four shows that I will be attending next year, but on a grand scale, meaning NADA, digital dealer, and a couple others. But the smaller scale, which is actually the most important scale, will be trying to get into Mopar, the Ford show, the Toyota show, the Hyundai show. Those are the events that are massive, and the return on them is exceptionally high. Like I talked to Russell Hill, who has fixed ops marketing.
Yep.
And he said his best return of any event that he's ever been to was Mopar this year.
Yeah, because I mean, we have a friend of the show owns a Mopar dealer, and it's no secret that the Mopar or the Chrysler dealers in North America have a lot of inventory and a lot of change on the top of that organization. So yeah, those dealers, there's definitely a need for help to move product, but also to move profitability. And I think that's probably also true, at least with Honda as well. As Honda's, they've made it a little more difficult for the manufacturers, for the dealers in terms of profitability because of a reduction in margin. So yeah, I mean, obviously, if you can target a group of dealers, that's a big plus. But also, those dealers probably don't have as many vendors in those shows to talk to. So it's that's another area, especially if you can be an improved vendor.
Think of those shows. The average show at NADA, I would say the NADA would be somewhere between probably somewhere between 3 and 5 to 1 vendor to dealer. Whereas you go to a manufacturer show like Mopar, it's going to be the opposite way around. It's going to be probably 5 or 10 to 1 dealer to vendor.
Yep.
So your actual return on it is significant, because that's basically they're going to see their vendor approved, like Ford Direct, vendor approved opportunities that they can push into their dealership without anything that is out there with restrictions.
Yeah.
So and
100%.
sometimes, I know in talking with Ford Direct at digital dealer, opportunities can be laid right into their own credit plans with their opportunities of financial assistance from the manufacturer. So, for example, Ditko say can be anywhere from, if depending, leasing through us is an opportunity, but when you buy it outright, it could be $250,000, $500,000, depending on the size of your store. And if you want it fixed or variable, it's expensive as a capital cost outlay. But if you go into the manufacturer, which Ford is accepted as an asset, and they'll finance it. So it's incredible for an opportunity if you can get into those shows.
Well, also, I mean, if you look at groups like obviously the when you look at Shift Digital, or you look at Search Optics is another one. These companies already have those relationships, so you may be able to leverage those as well. But at the end of the day, co-op is an advantage in some cases, depending on the manufacturer and, of course, the program. Some of the dealers don't seem to care about it at all because they don't believe the manufacturer has their best interest at heart. But it's definitely an advantage from a sales point of view, having been on multiple digital programs. And I'll use the example of partnerships, being that, we're very close to launching our multi-language piece, which will be live soon. But more importantly, that company already has multiple partnerships across the industry. So you also want to look at it and say, how can I partner with a company that already has those connections? That that's another area that's really
again, when you're talking co-op, you look at other opportunities. For example, websites.
Yep.
Websites. You look at the co-op of websites and what the manufacturers, and this is one of the challenges, as you said. Do dealers think that the manufacturer has their best interest? Well, if you're only allowing co-op to be on 3 or 4 different website providers, and none of them actually do the job great, they have acceptable websites because they're building it as a giant template for the whole industry rather than individualizing. It becomes, where does it make sense if you're only capturing 1.7 leads out of 100, whereas if you look at a offsite or an offshoot web provider has got a return of 12 to 16%, does the co-op money actually make sense anymore? That's the challenge. And the mindset is the dealer's looking for the return of their investment as fast as possible, and they look at co-op as being a return because it lowers their cost of expenses rather than looking at their opportunity moving forward. And that's one of the biggest challenges, and that's one of the reasons for these shows and getting that visibility out there.
Yeah, I mean, we're almost out of time. Maybe Larry has some thoughts, since I know he's busy there. Any final thoughts, Larry?
A couple of interviews. What was the last thing you were doing?
We were talking a little bit about co-op and partnerships. We were talking about groups like Search Optics and Shift Digital, which we know everyone loves Shift, and the fact that dealers sometimes make decisions based on co-op alone versus what the best product is, right? Or direct, those kind of relationships. I mean, what's your thought?
I just left a really cool dealership. I did a couple of days training, and I went in and did their Saturday meeting. And I just believe in my heart that you obviously want to have a great digital presence, and you want to have partners and vendors that will work with you that make sense. But now more than ever, I'm into prospecting because everybody is so bombarded with emails and texts and videos. It's still different when it's your cousin, your barber, somebody you served in the armed forces with. I think now more than ever, if we dial into the personal touch, it makes all the difference. And you can use your head how you do it. And the first year that I wrote up Christmas cards, handwritten, poly cards, I lost my mind because thank God I sold a zillion cars.
Yeah.
So what did I do the next year? Every time I would sell somebody a card, I would handwrite the envelope, put a couple business cards in, make it out, put it in my drawer. And then in December, all I had to do was go in and say, here, mail these 300, 200, 500 things. The more personal we get in a society where almost nobody answers their phone, you're talking to AI, you're talking to robots, they're there. Now, you can't neglect those things, and you certainly don't want to have that stuff in your arsenal. But I think if we tie in with the right things, if we think above and beyond co-op, which is strictly just a matter of all right, this is what the factory will give me and how can I use it. It's almost
We lost them. right at the critical point where he was giving us the plot line.
Well, yeah, I would agree 100%. When you look at AI, to use an example, and I've been doing a lot of research in AI recently and accelerating that. And from the eye of prospecting, I agree 100%. If you can customize and speed up prospecting, that's great. But I mean, things like birthday cards and Christmas cards are huge, or holiday cards if you're politically correct. Realistically, it's about touching that customer. Sorry, Larry, we lost you. You want to finish your thought?
Sure. Hold on. My thought was, we got an election coming up. We got AI running wild. More than ever, it's important to be human. It's important that if you want to get rich, I tell every salesperson I ever met in this business, act like the dealership isn't advertising. Act like it's on you. This way, everything that they bring in is on top. but more than ever, to be human, to reach out, to let everybody know who you are, what you do, and where you do it. It's the old thing. When things get very technical, I think old school always wins.
Oh yeah.
Even I had 7 people in to a dealership who were terrific. I'm blessed. But I always have 3 or 4 people that absolutely positively aren't any good because they didn't write it down and they forgot. That's it. Hey, by the way, I'm out. I got a guy calling me. Stay healthy, you and Peter and everybody else. Thanks for having me.
No worries.
See you, Larry.
Yeah, I mean, I always use the example, and it was a good example this week because there was some discussion from both the political parties in the U.S. of whether they should go on Joe Rogan. And I just saw the numbers this morning that Trump's Joe Rogan appearance has gotten over 32 million views so far. So I think no matter what side of that political spectrum you're on, you've got to be on alternative media. That's probably close to the number they got for the debate. So when you look at it, you've got to be open-minded for visibility, but more importantly, sometimes you got to be on shows that maybe you don't want to be on and you're not comfortable just because, people are watching. Like I was shocked at that number, just shocked at it.
Well, again, I'll lead into that for just my personal purposes here. There's been so many companies that have contacted me and said, okay, what can you bring to me for in ways of visibility? And because and I will say it this way, the ignorance of this industry is huge on how social media works and how specifically LinkedIn works, and Clubhouse as a whole. They don't realize the missed opportunities that they're engaging in right now, and that has created a whole new industry for what I call micro influencing. And that micro influencing, obviously, Joe Rogan is a massive influencer with a massive following.
Oh yeah, crazy.
Again, you look at little things like Russell flips whips.
Yeah,
It's $15,000 for a 45-second video for him.
Yeah,
that's what he's charging. John Frederick just left. Car dealership guy, and has gone out on his own called Freddie Media now, and he's picked up Samantha Sims of the Sims Price dealership group as one of the individuals that is investing into that media company. It's changing. That dynamic is changing in our industry, and those who are not prepared to get on it are going to be, again, living in the past. That pivot point that is so necessary for us right across the board, whether you're an OEM, a vendor, or a dealer, you have to be ready to pivot because the movement is moving so fast, and it's the archaic thought process of this industry that is causing 80% of the industry to lag.
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at that. You got to look at the visibility, and it's interesting you bring that up because as I've grown the show now in our 5th season, but also as I've grown our viewership and our media list in terms of people that I can touch every single week. What has shocked me recently is just the scale of lead generation for our sponsors. I just can't I can't tell you how much that's increased. And the other thing that's really surprising, whether it's on a video show or an audio show or both, is you're getting in front of people where years ago that would have been a TV ad, it would have been a large sales force, it would have been hundreds of thousands of dollars spent just to get out there in front of people, where you can do it weekly for a lot less. And always happy to talk to people about sponsored episodes and those kind of things. But we are sold out of sponsorship for next year already, so that's already done. But I think when you look at it from a point of view of getting in front of people, I don't think you can discount the weekly or monthly or recorded show platform. I think there's a lot of people out there
absolutely.
doing that.
For example, I looked at some. I had a client ask me for the statistics, and I went into it, and in the last calendar year, I've been in front of, and LinkedIn gives you the actual non-duplicates of everything, and I've been in front of 250,000 unique individuals in automotive.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
Where are you going to get that audience?
Yeah, I just don't see it. I mean, I'm looking at, my media kit when I look at that, but when I look at just impressions, my impressions on LinkedIn, I think, are close to 400,000 a year, and most of my audience is automotive. So from a point of view of impressions, it's huge. But not only that, I think the way you sell products and services has changed, and I think that's the big difference versus years ago. I mean, I talk to salespeople in the industry all the time, and I've sold many products to car dealers. I mean, I think that the challenge is just phone calls and emails and texts alone just aren't enough anymore. I mean, you have to have a presence. Anyway, we're out of time, so we got to end for today. So thanks again, and I'll reach out. Here we go.